Morning, everybody. Just going to start letting people in, and we'll get on with the presentation in a couple of minutes, I imagine. Morning, Hector. I think it's always the case with any kind of meeting that it might need a little bit of time for everybody to be able to join us. So I'm just going to keep letting people in, and hopefully we can start in the next few minutes. Apologies for the slightly late start. It's the way these things always work, though. And the presentation today, just to manage expectations of everybody on the phone, it's quite short. I've tried to keep the information as clear as possible, but I will be providing all of you a full report of all the information that I'm discussing now. I'll provide everybody the presentation, and I will also provide everybody with the information about the responses we had when you registered today. So I'll leave it a couple more minutes, and then I'll start, and hopefully anybody else who wants to join will be able to do so while we're doing the presentation. Thank you very much for your patience in the meantime. Okay. Hopefully that's on everybody's screens now. I'm going to start the presentation, and then I should be able to let anybody else in as we get going. So the topic for today is sustainable survey results. Just to give you an idea of what that is, this was a survey that was run to the attendance of a webinar. The webinar was on monomaterials and recyclable monomaterials. We had 201 respondents that came from variously consumer goods, converters, or supply chain in terms of those who were involved in tertiary supply or machine supply to those converters. And then we had academic so people who were from colleges or research institutions. The breakdown, just so you've got an idea of those 201 people, 22% of them, so just under a quarter, were from consumer goods companies. Just over 3/4 were from manufacturers, so suppliers, converters, and then a very small amount, 1.86%, were academic. In terms of the people who attended or answered the questions, job functions, as you can see, they were overwhelmingly focused on manager or engineering and operations, or R&D. So those three made up the majority of the people who attended. There were some executive, so C-suite, then there were about 10% director, and then a small amount were kind of everybody else. So people who were in a sales or marketing or procurement function. Most of the people who attended were from North America, because this was looking at innovation specifically in the North American market. Therefore, 71% of them were from North America. We had 12% were from Asia, 8% from Central and Southern America, and then 8.1% also were from EMEA. What were the questions we wanted to find out from everybody? So the methodology, the background to the survey was that we wanted to get information that would help to provide a clear picture of what people's thoughts were on sustainability, but we wanted to do so in a way that they would be able to answer the question and it wouldn't take too much time, because a lot of the time, if you have a longer interview style survey, what happens is people don't answer the questions, run out of time, or generally you don't get as detailed a response as if you ask them simpler questions that give you more of a ballpark answer. So the questions we asked, the first one was, I feel the most promising sustainable strategy in the next 5 years is. That was a multiple choice question. The next question was, the biggest sustainability challenge my organization faces today is. This one was a long form answer, so people could answer as much or little as they wanted to for that one. When it came to the packaging mix, so what are people actually using as materials, that was also multiple choice. The last project I had that covered this topic was, and that was also multiple choice. And finally, I am attending to, again, multiple choice. So 4 out of the 5 questions, the idea was that it was ticking a box, selecting 1 or 2 options that they felt were most promising. The first question. So I feel the most promising sustainable strategy in the next 5 years is. I've listed underneath this that we had 201 responses for this. So everybody who took part in the survey answered this question. What you're looking at on the screen, hopefully it's not too small. I appreciate the fact that it might depend on what size screen you're looking at this on, which is why I'm going to send everybody the full PDF presentation later anyway. So you've got this in slightly larger size. On the left side, the first pie chart you can see is a look at what all of the respondents said. So all of the respondents in total, the overall answers were recycling on its own is seen as the most promising sustainable strategy in the next 5 years. The second most popular was to have reduction and recycling. And the third most popular option was recycling and reduction and compostable. Bearing in mind, this is what everybody said. This is the 201 responses. If you take it to the consumer goods part, we see the first of the differences. before we'd asked these questions, I had no expectation of any differences. I thought there might be some, just because there's always going to be a level of a slight difference between what a manufacturer and a consumer good company might do to achieve their targets. But what you will see over the next few slides is that there's a lot of differences. The first major one is here. The consumer goods companies chose to see reduction and recycling as the most promising sustainable strategy for the next 5 years. Then recycling, reduction, and compostable, and finally recycling itself. If you take reduction and recycling, or recycling, reduction, and compostable, it's nearly 2/3 of those who were responding from the consumer goods side thought of those as the most promising strategies. If you then go to the manufacturers to the right, the final pie chart, you see that it matches the all respondents. So again, we flip back to recycling is number 1, reduction and recycling is number 2, and then finally recycling, reduction, and compostable. Not entirely sure why there is such a defined difference here. The most likely explanation is that because the consumer goods companies have a wider range of materials that they are using in their packaging mix, they are more open to a wider range of tools that they can then use in order to ensure that they achieve that sustainable strategy or goal that they're targeting. It was just interesting to see that there's immediately a difference. Part of it also is that in the case of reduction, as a strategy, and I can only speak from the manufacturer's perspective, from the supplier side, because that is directly cutting into your profit margin, it is always seen as a lesser step to take, whereas recycling allows you to provide the full material in order to still be making the same volume or amounts, but it doesn't impact what you're putting into the market. Reduction does so. So while it is seen as a better strategy, because it is a better strategy in most cases by the consumer goods companies, it is one that has the unfortunate side effect of costing companies money. So that's why we see it being less likely there. The second question, the biggest sustainability challenges my organization faces today, had 147 responses. In both organizations, so in the consumer goods and the manufacturers, you're seeing overwhelmingly, nearly 50% in both cases, are talking about something to do with materials. Materials are at the root of sustainability challenges in nearly 1 in 2 with all of those responses. Now, what follows is a slight difference. So in the case of the consumer goods companies, something to do with sustainability is the second most important challenge being faced, followed by issues to do with challenges that are brought up by consumers or customers. In the consumer goods companies side, that's leaning more towards consumer-based issues. In the manufacturer's side, when they talk about customer and consumer, they're talking more about customer issues. But in both cases, it's interesting to see that the responses are kind of the same. It's just the order of priority is a little bit different. Now, having that order be materials, customer, sustainability for the manufacturers shows that there is still a gap in clarity, in understanding purpose, in how both parties are working with each other. Because if the manufacturers ultimately, who are providing the material support or the format support or the machinery support to those consumer goods companies, if they are still struggling with what it is that those customers need or being able to give it to them, that is always going to cause a problem, either immediately or down the road, because they're not giving their customer what they want in some form or shape. The sustainability problems, that's an interesting topic as well, because it shouldn't be the case that sustainability related challenges are the biggest sustainability challenge that an organization faces. What would have been expected was something along the lines of scale, cost, availability, and materials. Those are the ones that we're expecting to see up there, because ultimately, if you're trying to switch into a recyclable format, if you're trying to make a compostable pack, if you're trying to reduce the material or lightweight it in some way to achieve sustainability targets, all of those are directly impacting the material. They're also affecting the supply chain and the recovery and various other factors, but materials are usually interwoven into that. When it comes to packaging mix, this is perhaps less surprising. Less surprising because the responses of the people we were talking to, I was asking questions of people who were majority in flexible packaging. In the case of the manufacturers, therefore, the fact that flexible plastic, paper, and metal were their most listed materials is less surprising. The fact that it's more than 50% flexible plastic packaging is more just an example of the fact that we were talking to people who were majority supporting or supplying that industry specifically. The consumer goods companies, however, were more broad, as again would be expected, because for the most part, they are more likely to be using a balanced approach, more likely to be focused on fit for purpose. So whichever material is going to be able to provide them the best preservation, protection, promotion, etc. for the packaging mix, those are the ones that they're going to be using. So they do have a slight majority flexible plastic, but between flexible plastic and paper, there's not much in it. And then again, between those rigid plastic, again, it's very closely monitored. Now, I will send in the report that I'm sending out to everybody, I have the details on the packaging mix in millions of pack units globally by GlobalData. And that still has flexible plastic as the majority material in the marketplace. It's just about a third, but paper and rigid plastic and metal and glass are much closer to each other in terms of the overall breakdown. In fact, it does kind of match almost identically what you're seeing on the left side there. So the packaging mix of those who are responding was kind of in line with what you would expect to find if you were to ask a snapshot of the global packaging industry. The next question was the last project that I had that covered this topic was. Now, I'm not sure about those who are on the phone with me, so hopefully you can bear with me while I do this quick explanation. But previously, one of the roles that I had before I was working in industry was as an editor. I managed a number of global leading trade publications, magazines that covered packaging, converting, and then different markets, so like food or beverage or cosmetics or pharmaceutical. What you found when you write an article on a topic, sustainability, for example, given that we're talking about it right now, is that if I was to say to everybody in this room, what do you know about sustainability? You would all be able to tell me an answer because you have read about it or engaged with it or talked about it or discussed it. But the degree to which you've had those conversations can change dramatically. And that actually has a huge impact on understanding. So when I ask about the last project, the reason behind that is to find the answer to that far column. Because I would normally say to somebody, what do you know about flexible packaging? They give me an answer. And then I would say to them, when did you last have a project that concerns flexible packaging, printing, sustainability, whatever the question is? And that is the answer that tells you a lot more, because a lot of the time, and I'm very much guilty of this as well, somebody talks to me about a topic and I've read about it, I've seen an article about it, I've somehow had it come to my mind. So I will answer them as if I have the full current information about that topic. Oh yeah, this is what's happening in sustainability today. And my information might not be up to date. So asking about whether it's a current project, whether it's more than a year ago, whether it's about future need, or more importantly, never, gives us a very good understanding of how vital is the information that people are talking about. How likely are they to do something with this information? Does it have a purpose? Does it have a immediate time frame that they are trying to address? So the reason that's interesting is that, of course, current and active projects are overwhelmingly what people are looking at here. You can see it 60% and 69%. By the time you add future need, so current or into the future, you're looking at 80% and 84% of respondents. So the vast majority of people understandably have projects that are focused on sustainability. It's such an important topic, and it is something that is being discussed and focused on and regulated and complied worldwide for the last 7 years at such a phenomenal rate that, of course, you're expecting to see these numbers. What is surprising is the more than a year ago, so older projects, or never. Now, in the consumer goods case, 7% is not that bad. But in the manufacturer's case, nearly 10% of people have never had a project concerning sustainability. So if I focus on those for a second, that has kind of two possibilities. Either somebody is not engaging with a project because it's nothing to do with their specific job, and that is completely possible here. And if that's the case, it's not such an issue. But if they are saying that they as a company have never covered this topic, they've never had any kind of projects that they're aware of that focus on this, that is a bit more worrying, because trying to be a company that has no sustainability footprint or activity or information in 2023 is leading you down a very, very narrow runway that is going to finish very soon. And you will legally not be able to provide products into the market in the not too distant future unless you are sustainable or aligned with these overall requirements of the industry. So, final question I am attending to, again, had 201 responses. The idea behind here was that this is focused on intention. I'm aware of the fact that when there is a market research or survey or questions, whenever you talk to people and ask them questions, the likelihood is that you get an answer that they think you want to hear, whether it's a group of people in a room or a survey response. Most of us default to wanting to answer the question to show us in the best light, rather than answering the question because it's what our actual thoughts are. So in that case, when it comes to the responses between both the consumer goods and manufacturers, again, in this case, I would have thought to have found a higher response rate addressing a specific project. They've literally just announced that 2/3 of the people, up to 80% of them, are looking at current or future projects. But now you find out that actually the real reason that people are attending and wanted to learn about that information on monomaterials is that they're trying to understand the latest innovation. They're trying to understand those opportunities, which in turn will allow them to generate future addressable specific projects. So it's interesting in the priority being placed on why people need the information. It's not to address those current projects they've just announced that they have. It's in fact to learn about what else is out there, understand opportunities. And this is also something that does fall in line with the way that this falls in line with quite a lot of the understanding that we have when we're looking at the information here, because while it's important to be able to address those specific projects with the answers that they're picking up, what is more likely, and what this information shows us, is that understanding the background to the information, knowing what we don't know, trying to fill in the gaps of, okay, where could I potentially learn something new that's going to help me remove a roadblock, proceed with my project, do my job better, any one of a myriad of reasons it's going to help me do more. That's why the innovation and understanding opportunities part is so much more important here. So the intention, despite the fact that there are a lot of projects that are being covered, the intention here is to learn, to understand an opportunity, and then be able to move that opportunity into some kind of project or demonstrable growth. Outcome and discovery. So this part is a very simple breakdown. On the left side, there's a key bit of information. I'm not sure if those on the call are familiar, but by 2030, millennials are expected to be 70% of purchasing power for the global market, or markets. They're expected to take over from the boomers. They're expected to be responsible for their children. They're basically expected to have an enormous power in consumer purchasing. Sustainability is one of their priorities, if not the priority for them. And so companies need to be able to clearly explain the sustainable benefits to that market. And by that, I mean that you need to be able to let them understand why what is being done as a sustainable packaging material or benefit or development in your company helps them to be more sustainable in some way. So just announcing we have reduced or we have recyclable materials, or doing something that frames it as a sustainable benefit, but more to the company than to the consumer, if that happens, then what the consumers tend to see is, okay, I understand the benefits to your company. You know, you've taken costs out of your raw materials, or you've found a way to make a kind of a green statement. But unless that green claim or statement or benefit directly supports me and my sustainability needs, I'm not going to buy into this product. And if I don't see myself buying into the product, I'm not going to buy it. And if I don't buy it, of course, it's a lost opportunity. So overall, surprised by the number of differences, had expected there to be a much closer alignment between the two parties. The impact of these differences might not be so large today, but if they're not checked, they will cause problems down the road, because if everybody is working to different targets or different goals, it makes it much harder to come together down the roads towards a circular economy. There will be a gap somewhere. The fact that the manufacturers prefer a recycle-only sustainability strategy, while consumer goods see a more balanced approach, is significant, more so because the idea, it seems to be that the manufacturers are less willing to follow a strategy that could ultimately see them losing volume or profit, because if they're making fewer materials, or if they are looking at a way of trying to be involved in, say, compostable, it might be giving them more of a headache, so they're less able to supply the demanded volume and to address those key requirements of scale and cost. And therefore, recycling is seen as a solution that allows them to be headed towards a circular economy, but not have to miss out. So that's something that's going to probably need to get looked at in the coming years, because recycling is not a silver bullet solution. And if all of their eggs are in one basket, it leaves the door open towards potential problems in the future if their customers are looking at a balanced approach and they're only focused on recycling. The challenges, while materials would be expected as something that would be a sustainability challenge, the bigger issue is that there is much less focus on scale and cost problems. So ultimately, when it comes to sustainability, the two biggest factors, overwhelmingly, tends to be the reality of making the replacement or substitute material in enough volume to replace what it needs to replace, and then being able to scale up a working recyclable or sustainable technology so that it can cover that much broader need. What we saw overall in the responses is that there still is a bit of a finite mindset. Companies are looking at winning sustainability. I've got the best sustainability strategy. My focus is on, being the most sustainable, having the best sustainability message. All of those are worthy, but they are too short-term focused for a topic like sustainability. Sustainability needs to be really, really wide. You need to be looking at a infinite mindset where you think to yourself, okay, I don't want to just be making my product in a week or a month or 2 months time or a year's time. I want to be in business in 1,000 years time. How would I make my product today so that I can continuously make it without issues in 100 years, 1,000 years time? All of that will help to optimize machinery, systems, processes. It will help to actually generate a more circular mindset, which will help get to those circular targets a lot quicker. A lot of interest in the topic, but it's also interesting to understand how imminent that information is. So a lot of people want to know about the topic and have projects on it, but they're not necessarily acting on trying to complete those projects today. So more gathering data, trying to understand the information that was available, then looking at trying to directly answer project by project today. And so that's it for the main presentation. I welcome any questions from people. I hope that there's been something new or interesting or different in this information I've shared with you. And I will be sharing the full report, presentation, and also the raw data with everybody, so that you can see all of the information that you've just looked at now in its raw form. If you want to provide your own examples or analysis, you'd be welcome to do so too. And with that, I am going to stop sharing and look forward to any questions that you may have. And if there are no questions, then I'm also happy to finish the call now and then I can let anybody who's got any follow-up questions come back to me directly. I think Hector might have a question. So to answer the question from Hector, what is the thought about chemical recycling's future role? This is another of those areas that sits in the more infinite mindset. Chemical recycling really is the future. So the current problem is a scale issue in that we have in flexible packaging, for example, you're looking at a capacity of maybe 5 to 10 kilotons for a product range that most mid-sized consumer goods companies might have 220 kilotons or 150 kilotons of usage. So it's like 4% or 5% at the moment of being able to provide the needed material. That is changing dramatically at the moment. So there are 4 companies, Exxon and Nova, I think SABIC, and I believe there may be one more, are all generating and building plants that are looking to provide up to, I think Exxon's one is going to be like 250 kilotons or 500 kilotons in the next 7 to 10 years. So I see chemical recycling as being one of the biggest opportunities once it's up and running in the next probably 5 to 10 years to help with this problem, because then it's going to give you a product that is returned to exactly the same state. So there will be no difference. There is no difference in chemical recycling between the chemically recycled material and the material that you put in the first place. With mechanical, there's a lot of difficulties with barriers, food contact, which make it, although it's the much more cost-effective way of doing it, it's not quite as good. So it's sort of one of those things that works, say 70%, 80% of the time, which is okay, but 80% is not 100%. Whereas chemical recycling, in theory, should give you a much closer to full coverage. I hope that answers your question. Of course. Just waiting for another question at the moment. That's a very good question. So the follow-on question is, do I know anything about any developments that will make glass more environmentally friendly? That is a very tricky area. It also can be answered in the same lines as chemical recycling, because it is something that is being looked at in a much more infinite mindset. So when it comes to building glass plants, manufacturing plants, they are a very big expense, and they do have the downside of releasing enormous amounts of energy. It's thousands of degrees to melt the silicon and create glass in the first place. So you have these huge ovens that are giving off vast amounts of energy, and they have not really changed much in the last like 20 or 30 years. So a lot of the current glass manufacturing plants are a little bit dated in terms of their energy efficiency or carbon capture capabilities. The new ones that are being built do, however, have ways of trying to siphon the energy off in small ways or larger ways that can reduce the overall carbon footprint and emissions of those plants as they move forward. The biggest problems are that the weight of the material and the energy that's required to make it, whether it's being made or recycled, are both still going to be vast. So at the moment, there is a development going on at the moment to improve a small percentage of those glass packaging to make it more environmentally friendly. They've found a way to reduce the energy requirements by about 15 to 20% in some cases. So like Arda has been able to do that. The pharmaceutical and kind of smaller glass ones have been able to do that too. So I would say that at the moment, there are some developments when it comes to making glass more environmentally friendly. And it is one of the best materials for being inert and for the haptics of packaging. It remains seen as one of the most high-end possible products by producers. But at the moment, it's still limited in major changes to make it in line with something like, say, a metal can in terms of its lightweightness. But what I will do is I will send you a update from the major glass packaging and building companies to let you know about what some of the latest developments are for them. Hopefully that will help. So raw material sources, for all raw materials, I would say that the in the case of sand, there is there's an interesting discussion going on at the moment. So you have when you have silicon being used multiple times, it eventually, I think it's about 30 times or 40 times, when glass goes through a number of times through the production process, it is eventually not reusable. It gets kind of dirtied, it gets, the clarity is lost, the glass stops being completely transparent, so it starts becoming that amber color. So when it comes to the source, when it comes to sand, there has been a couple of issues recently about trying to make sure that there is a ongoing open silicon that is the clearest and least likely to contain any kind of pieces that are able to corrupt the final glass being made. So there hasn't been any short-term issues with raw materials in terms of sourcing the sand needed for glass development. There are questions about, in the future, how sustainable is sand production for glass manufacturing, because historically it was seen as, you know, there's lots of grains of sand in the world, we can't possibly be making a dent into it. But the reality is that the sand that is currently being used for different industries like construction, as well as glass manufacturing, as well as glass manufacture for other things like construction or automotive, etc., it means that there's actually been some areas where they have dug too deep. So it causes issues because it allows the companies to be able to come into an area which has got a quite well balanced ecosystem, and the ecosystem is somehow changed by pulling away all of the sand from that area. So to back up, Hector, one of the biggest materials issues is that companies that are pulling sand from a fixed location, if they stay in one spot to source that sand, it causes a lot of problems, because you can change the flow of a river, or you can remove the foundations from something. So it has to be a balance of using small spaces and then spreading it out, like everything else, in the same way as we wouldn't want to overuse a specific location to produce the biomass based material that's going into plastic packaging, because you then over farm one specific area. In the same way with sand, in the same way with metal, what you're trying to do is make sure that the mining of and the extraction of is as well and broadly kind of split as possible. I hope that answers your question. You're very welcome. And I hope that for Preston and Dalika that there was you've had your questions answered as well. But by all means, please just drop me a line or an email with any questions you have, and I'm more than happy to answer them at any time. And yes, I totally agree, Hector. It's difficult when you look at glass and versus plastic in a kind of better than answer, because neither's better than the other. There's just the case that one benefits different packaging mixes and products depending on what's more fit for purpose. So in the case of glass, it is one that is seen as more luxurious. It has innate barrier properties and it's more inert. It has the opportunity to endo or hypothermically raise the temperature or cool down much more quickly than plastic or paper do. So if you put a glass jar into the fridge, or if you heat it up, it will get hotter, will get colder a lot faster, and hold that outside for a lot longer, which is why, you know, even these days people are still prefer like a glass bottle of Coca-Cola, because it just somehow seems more refreshing. Like there's not any chemical reason why that's the case. It's just fixed in our minds that it's the kind of the better product than a glass bottle. But yeah, I think that it depends on what product you are packaging, what you think is the most fit for purpose need, what you are trying to convey about the product to that consumer, and then that's usually the best way of finding that, what's going to be the most fit for purpose opportunity, what's going to help you provide them the best possible product. Which, as I was saying in the end of the survey, like the big thing is that, as you know, from a packaging perspective, you're trying to make a product that addresses a consumer need, and you are limited in addressing that consumer need because you have to actually make a product. So, I could say as a consumer, I want my products to be compostable, but the reality is that I can't make every possible package into a compostable one. So I therefore need to look at what are the other options that I've got to make that product best for them. So I think that glass is and remains one that is most likely to continue to have a strong presence in the market. It may not be as big or made in as much volume as flexible plastic packaging is, but I still see it as being one of the crucial materials going forward. Were there any more questions, Hector, or are you happy at the moment? No, you're very welcome. And yeah, any questions or if you need any of this information from me, please just let me know. But I will send everybody the presentation, the report, the raw material, everything, so that you've got all of that available for yourselves. Thank you very much. I hope you both have a wonderful day, and I hope that that was informative to you. And I will send that information over to you, Hector. Take care. Have a lovely day.